All right, now we're into part number 10, teardown time. Should have your printer handy. We're going to tear the printer apart. We're going to take it down to just about bare bones. We're going to take a lot of stuff out of here. We're not, as mentioned before, going to go after the print head and the feed aligner because the alignment process that needs to take place between the two. We will take out the print head. We will not take out the feed aligner. We're going to talk about how you would do that. And of course, we've already talked about the alignment procedure for it. Things that you will need for this particular module, you're going to need a couple different things. The service manual is something that you will need for the particular model that you're working with here in case, say, for instance, you get stuck. You know, how does this come apart? How does it go back together again? Where are the screws located again? There's a removal replacement section in the service manuals that will be of help for that. Not always as detailed as we like, but, you know, when you need help on something, you know, that's a good place to go looking for that. Exploded diagrams can also be helpful. You may also go back through the presentation here and go, okay, well, we were covering that when, and be able to take a look at where it was at and how it was taken out, how it should go back in again. So service manuals, Lexmark T52XT62X or C63X printer, obviously, so that you can do the teardown portion with me. And I'm going to go step by step, so please stay with me. If you need to pause the module for a little bit, you know, listen to me, pause the module, do what we were just talking about, and then unpause it, you know, pick up again. What are we doing now? Listen, take notes. Okay, pause the module again. Go ahead and do what we were just talking about. It's probably a good approach because I'm going to go faster than what you could probably do in order to take the machine apart. So I want you to do this along with me so that you learn, because we're going to talk about, you know, all those different aspects of the machine, dangerous areas, things you got to be careful of, things that can cause you trouble. Some, you know, break fix information we'll talk about in here as well. So you want to be able to have time to listen and not just do. Also tools. And before I talk about tools, I should also mention, if you have an Optra S or an Optra T, that's okay. You can use those too because we're also going to address them in this module as well. Tools, number 1 and number 2 Phillips screwdriver. You will need both of them because there are times when you have a number 1 or number 2 Phillips screw head that you need to remove here, or your screw to remove here. So have both of these, a flathead screwdriver. You're also going to need a 5.5 millimeter wrench, 7 millimeter nut driver, and that is for a feed aligner that we're aware of, right? Paper feed aligner. And we're not going to take that out, so you may not necessarily need it right now, but if you're working on the Lexmarks, you will need this at some point in time. Needle nose pliers, and also ESD equipment. ESD equipment is important. It does matter. You need to use proper ESD equipment to protect the delicate electronics, such as the system board or RIP board, the print head, and the engine board. They are all static sensitive. The human body normally carries about 10,000 volts of charge, so you're touching the board. You may not see the zap, but that difference of potential can cause degradation to the chips and cause the board to fail prematurely. So do use ESD equipment. For those of you who said, hey, it really doesn't matter, at a minimum, you look more professional using ESD equipment. So you're in front of the customer using the wrist strap, the mat, and the whole 9 yards, and the customer looks at you versus the competition that may not, and they're just throwing boards out on the countertop. Who are they going to call next time? All right, from that standpoint alone, you should have ESD equipment. Let's get acclimated with the printer here. So you should have your printer looking at it very much like what we have here, regardless of which model it is. I want to identify things. First off, the top is the top and the bottom is the bottom. This is pretty obvious, as well as the front is closest to you and the back is farthest away from you. Where it usually gets, you know, confusing here is when I'll talk about things such as, you know, need to go to the right rear corner of the machine. Well, we know where the rear is or the back of the machine is, but where's the right side? Which side? The printer's right or my right? Well, the way that I'm going to define it here is, you know, your right is its right. So if you take your hands, put it on the front of the machine there, your right hand and your left hand. Your right hand is the right side of the machine. Your left hand is the left side of the machine, and that's how I'm going to reference things. So when I go, say, for instance, go to the front left corner, you're going to go to the left-hand side, put your left hand in the front of the machine and the front corner there. So it's going to give you a reference. And I will be using those references as we address the machine, especially once the covers come off. It's going to get a little bit more confusing here. So with that, step number 1, remove the maintenance kit parts. You did this earlier. In the maintenance kit chapter, we went through step by step and we took out the different parts of the maintenance kit, which include the fuser, transfer roll, charge roll, and the 6 pick rolls. You may not have 6 pick rolls in your machine no big deal. Take off however many are there. But I want you to do a maintenance kit. And since you know how to do that, I'm assuming that you know how at this point in time. And if you don't know how, you might want to go back to module number 6 and step through that portion. But that's the first part, and we're not going to cover it here because, again, you already know how to do this. Pause the material or pause the presentation now. And when you're ready, unpause it, and we will continue. Assuming you're ready to continue now, we're going to start by removing the left cover. So left-hand side cover here, your left is its left. So my T52XT62XT63X, my Optic T is similar to this. The buttons are in a slightly different position here, but find the buttons that I'm pointing at here, press them, and you're going to find the door kind of pops open, and then once the door is open, tilt it out at a 90-degree angle from the machine, and you can pop out the hinges here from the back, from the top, and from the bottom, and completely remove the left cover. If you have an Optra S machine, things are a little bit different. In fact, looking at the Optra S machine here, I've got sort of a two-piece cover here. It's a little bit different. So I've got my fingers on the two buttons here on the side there. Press them, and when you do that, the whole left cover sort of shifts away, and you can set that off to the side. Except that's only part number 1. The second part, as I'm looking at the whole left side of the machine here, notice the yellow circles here? The yellow circles are highlighting the 5 screws that we need to remove yet. So on your machine, you're going to take your Phillips screwdriver, find the right size, and you're going to remove those 5 different screws here, because that white cover that wraps kind of around the outside there, around that metal plate there, that's my RF shield that protects my main logic board. And that cover there needs to be removed at this point. So remove those 5 screws. Cover still won't come off yet. Go around to the inside of the machine. So where the toner cartridge was, open up the doors. Cartridge should be gone because you did a maintenance kit, right? And there are 3 screws along the left-hand side. So as you look in the machine there, on the left-hand side, you're going to see 3 screws there. Screwdrivers in the top one, and the other 2 are circled in yellow. Once you take those 3 screws out, remember on the bottom one, open up the envelope feeder or the envelope connection cover so that you can get at that. Removing those last 3 screws on an Optra S series, you can then take that cover completely off and remove it from the machine, set it off to the side. Awful lot of screws in that one. It really holds on well, I guess. With that done, we're now going to the top half of the machine. On the top front cover, this is my display cover. Well, I should say the cover around the display. It's also that cover that I open up in order to remove the toner cartridge. That cover is coming off next. Note we have 3 screws displayed here. Now this is for my Optra T, T52XT62XT63X. For my Optra S, I have 5 screws on this one. It's like a giant X, you could say. So you've got the 3 screws that you see here, plus 2 more back by the hinges there. So in an Optra S, 5 screws, all the other machines, 3 screws to remove the cover. Take out the 3 screws, and then before you go a whole lot further here, take note here. As I'm lifting off the tray cover here, I've got my thumb on this piece of plastic. My thumb on that piece of plastic there is holding it in place there. What that is that's that button. Notice the button on the side there? Actually, the way you're looking at the button on the left-hand side, that's what you're pushing in order to unlatch the door in order to cause it to open. Now, if you just kind of pull off the cover, it's all going to fall apart, and the spring's going to pop out. We're going to talk about that in a second. You want to kind of hold that down so that when you take off that cover, you can set the whole thing aside safely and it doesn't all fly apart at you. As you're doing that too, we're going to take a closer look at that spring. If you take that piece of plastic, for the latch that I was holding down with my thumb there, and you kind of pop that apart a little bit, you can see the spring in there and see how it fits in position. It's probably a good thing to take a quick look at, because at some point in time you forget about this and you're popping off the cover and all of a sudden, boom, everything falls apart and the spring goes flying. You're going, where does the spring go? Now you have a concept where it goes. You might want to make a note in your service manuals on that too, upon the disassembly area, so that in the future you're going, where in the heck does this thing go? You have a clue as to where it goes and where it's supposed to go. So it sits inside there and it kind of condenses every time that you push in that button there on the side. It sits in between the top cover and that latch in this little slot. So do take a look at that. And then set that front cover off to the side. Once you've removed that top cover, we're now kind of looking at the front of the machine. MPT tray door is now open as well. And we're going to remove the right side cover. So the right cover is coming off next. and getting a closer look at that right side. You know, first off, I got the screwdriver on the single screw that's inside there that we need to remove. And down below, I'm pointing at the latch that's kind of holding it there in the side cover. So I'm going to have to unhook that, remove the screw. Once you've done that, front of the machine again, getting in reference, I'm going to the back half of the machine now, where the fusing assembly was removed here earlier when you did the maintenance kit removal, maintenance kit parts removal. In the back half of the machine, my redrive assembly has been removed. So I'm now looking at, the right side of the machine from the front, or as I'm looking at it, on my left-hand side as I'm looking at it, I've got a couple different screws back over there. One you can see the screwdriver on, the other one with the red arrow. Depending upon the version of machine, they may be in slightly different locations there. If you have an Optra S version, it's going to be slightly different. But remove the two different screws here. And once you do that, you're going to be able to take that cover and tilt it out from the bottom. There are little hooks, per se, that hold it in the bottom. And as you tilt this out, you're going to be able to remove completely the right cover from that machine. So take that, set it off to the side, put the screws with it. So once that's been done, we're now going after the top cover. So we're going to get all these covers off here. We're looking at it from the right-hand side where we just took off the right cover. So taking this, you've got the two screws that we're pointing out here. Take those two screws there, go ahead and remove them. Phillips screwdriver again. One of the screwdrivers on that you can see here, the other one I'm pointing to. Once you have those two out, we now have a little sort of clip or hook that holds the cover down in place. It's kind of like two little hooks that are clamping onto the machine there, one from each side. We're going to have to kind of take them and pry them out one at a time in order to remove the cover. So this is the first one. This is located toward where the front screw was for the top cover. So take your flathead screwdriver. You can do that. Then we're going over to the left side of the machine. Left side of the machine, we have two screws again by chance. So the two yellow circles that you see here, take out those two screws, and then we've got all the screws out for the top cover. Next, we've got one more hook or latch here that's holding that top cover in. And as you can kind of see here, we've got the screwdriver inserted behind it. I've got it circled in yellow here. And you're going to take that and pry that one out as well. And once you do that, you can lift up that top cover and completely remove it from the machine. Note here too, I'm also taking the top front cover and I'm holding it down. The actual cover is gone, but the front section there is with the cover gone, that latch isn't on it, so it will no longer stay down anymore. So you need to physically hold it down as you're taking off that top cover there. So once you take off the top cover, you can gently, let that cover back up, the front cover back up in place again. It will not latch down at this point in time. But just be careful of that, because some people will just kind of, when they're done, they'll let go, expect it to latch in, it goes, pops back up, and makes the machine jump. Not good for it. So top cover, set it off to the side, and now we're going to take a look at that left-hand side. We're going to go after that main logic board and remove that from the machine. To do that, first thing we need to do is you have 6 screws here that are part of that RF shield. Do not remove them. Simply loosen them. All of these are slotted, which means that I'm going to be able to leave them loosely in place and remove the cover with that. So loosen up those 6 screws. I believe these should be all number 1 Phillips screws here. And once you've done that, notice the little tabs there sticking out the side. Grab them just like I've got them here. And you're going to take that RF shield and lift up and remove it and set it off to the side. Once that's off to the side, we can see inside what's inside there. And I have my T63X that we're working on, so T634 that we're looking at more specifically, but this is going to be very similar for a T62X or T63X. I'm going to have a system board, which means, as we're taking a look at it here, I've got a lot of wires plugged in over here on the right-hand side, which means that this is kind of my engine controller, and I've also got my main logic board kind of conglomerated into one. Well, let's identify some of the different parts of this board here. See the red box that just popped up on the top? This is where I'm going to put in the extra memory expansion if I choose to. Some of the boards, depending upon which version that you have, will have the memory expansion on the top that you see here, top left. Some will have it on the bottom right. It depends upon which machine that you have. Some will have what look like memory slots, but instead of being across, they're going to be vertical, and they're going to be much bigger. On some of the older machines, you're going to see that. That is the flash memory. That's where the flash memory would install if you would be adding flash memory for that. Also down below, see the other red box that just popped up. This is for the interconnect board. There's a board down below there, and they call it the interconnect board because all these different boards that can plug into it and interconnect with one another. It's much like a computer where when you add a card to a computer, it plugs into a socket or a connection there. And so all those different boards and those different sockets across there can communicate with one another. Same type of concept here. If I were adding a network card, for instance, I would plug it into one of those slots. It could then talk with my main logic board. Okay, we're going to remove this board at this point in time. So first thing we're going to do is if you have a system board like we have here, T52X, T63X, you've got all these cable connections that need to be disconnected from it. If you don't have a system board, you're not have to worry about that. We're going to address non-system board or RIP boards, here shortly. So hold on for that part if you've got a RIP board type of machine. Unplug the different connections. Once you've done that, we've got 4 screws in order to remove this main logic board, the system board, along with the metal pan. We're taking the whole thing out together. Find these 4 different screws. The ones on the right here that you see are pretty obvious. They're part, kind of through the board there. The ones on the left are a little bit different. The one on top is kind of tucked back across the top, and the one on the bottom there is kind of sticking more out towards you there. But remove those 4 screws. Once you've done that, you can then take the whole pan and all, and this is ESD sensitive, so you should have your wrist strap on and the mat ready to go to put the board on the mat so it stays at the same potential. You can then lift up that board and unplug it from that socket, thus removing it, set it on the ESD mat so it stays at the same potential as well. If you have a RIP board type of version, say like a T52X, Optra T, Optra S version, you're going to have 2 boards, an engine controller and a RIP board or main logic board. We're going to take out the main logic board in this particular scenario. So you would find the screw locations here, and you can see we've got 3 yellow circles here pointing out where the screws are. On your older machines, the main logic board is much bigger, so you're going to have to find the screws in through the boards there. And we've also got on the bottom left here, you've got a red arrow pointing toward, here's where the other screw is. So 4 screws total. Find the 4 screws, remove them, ESD sensitive here again, and same as before. You're going to lift up this board, unplug it from the socket, set it on the ESD mat, put the screws alongside it. Don't put the screws on top of the board, because if you have any charges from any, say, capacitors on that board, and those screws go across traces, they may short, from one trace to another and possibly cause damage to the board. Screws off to the side. Once the RIP board or main logic board has been removed, in a dual board type of system, we still have the engine controller. The engine controller, you can see here, once you've removed the RIP board, we need to take that out next. To remove it, you have all sorts of wires that need to be disconnected from it. So find those different sets of wires, unplug them. And once you've done that, we then have 4 different screws that need to be removed from the board. Now, older versions, as I recall, are only going to have 2 screws in it, and then you've also got something called a standoff that's holding it in place. A standoff is kind of like a plastic peg that pokes up through the board there, except it's got a little, little piece that flares out. So when you got the board here, and you got this little piece that flares out, when you try and remove it, that flared piece is going to catch the board, and you won't be able to get it out. You're going to have to take your needle nose pliers, pinch that together so it looks like one peg, and then slide it through the board so that you can get that board out of there. So older versions, you're going to see the standoff there. But take out the 4 screws, or however many that you may have on an older version. If you have the standoffs to deal with, go ahead and do that too. And then you can simply lift up and remove the engine controller. Again, ESD sensitive, goes on my ESD mat so I can keep it at the same potential and not cause, damage to the board. Set the screws alongside as well. With this board then removed, we still have this metal plate behind it, and we're going to have to remove that in order to get at things behind it. So single screw that you see down below here, and you can see the screwdriver that's on that. Take out the single screw, and then you can remove this metal pan that sits behind where our engine controller was. And once you've done that, you've gotten it to the same point as to where we had the system board removed for. We've got a good view of the left-hand side of the machine, and that brings us to the conclusion of our first part of the teardown section. When you come back, we're going to pick up with that left side with a lot of other things that need to come out as of yet. So this is the end of part 10, first module of our teardown. And when you're ready, we're going to come back to the second part of the module here and take out more stuff yet and talk about a lot more parts inside the machine yet. So when you're ready, let me know.